My family mocked my computer hobby, billion-dollar crypto revenge exposed over breakfast. The kitchen still smelled like the pancakes Mom had made for what she called our family discussion, though the tone in her voice when she called this morning suggested it would be anything but sweet. I sat at the familiar oak table where I'd done homework as a kid, eaten countless birthday breakfasts, and apparently was now about to be officially downed by the Peterson family. My father, Robert Peterson, sat across from me in his weekend polo shirt, the one he wore when he wanted to look casual but still authoritative. My older brother Marcus occupied his usual spot to Dad's right, checking his Rolex every few minutes like he had somewhere more important to be. My sister Jennifer sat with her arms crossed, her fresh manicure catching the morning light as she drummed her fingers impatiently against the table. "Alexandra," Dad began, using my full name like he was addressing a board meeting. "We've called this meeting because we're concerned about your choices." I took a sip of coffee from my chipped mug, the same one I'd been using since college. "Pie choices?" "Your lifestyle," Mom clarified from her position by the sink where she was aggressively cleaning already clean dishes. "It's been 3 years since you graduated, and you're still living in that tiny apartment working those odd computer jobs." "Freelance web development," I corrected quietly. Marcus snorted. "Freelance unemployment is more like it. Do you even have health insurance?" I did have health insurance, excellent health insurance actually, through the LLC I'd established for my various business ventures. But they'd never asked about the details of my work, too busy assuming I was barely scraping by. "The thing is, sweetheart," Dad leaned forward with his best fatherly expression. "We've been patient. We understood you needed time to figure things out after college. But this freelance computer thing isn't a real career." Jennifer nodded emphatically. "All our friends ask what you do, and it's embarrassing. Marcus is a financial advisor with his own firm. I'm a marketing director at Belmont Industries. What am I supposed to say? That my sister sits at home in pajamas all day playing on her laptop?" I actually spent most of my time in business casual attire managing a portfolio of investments that had grown far beyond what any of them could imagine. But their version of my story was more convenient for their narrative. "We've made a decision," Dad announced, pulling out a folder thick with documents. "It's time for some tough love." Here it comes. I'd been expecting this conversation for months, watching their disapproval grow as they became more convinced I was wasting my life. What they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment almost as long. "We're cutting off your allowance," Mom said, finally turning from the sink. "No more monthly deposits, no more emergency fund access. You need to understand the real world." I blinked. "My allowance?" Marcus looked smug. "The $800 a month Dad's been sending you. Don't act surprised. We know you've been living off family money while pretending to be independent." That was interesting. I hadn't received money from my parents since my sophomore year of college when I'd started my first cryptocurrency mining operation in my dorm room. But apparently, Dad had been making deposits to an old account I'd forgotten existed. "Furthermore," Dad continued, "we've arranged for you to interview at Peterson Financial Services. Marcus has agreed to give you a position in their entry-level program." "Very generous of him," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It is generous," Jennifer snapped. "Marcus is risking his reputation by hiring someone with no real work experience. The least you could do is show some gratitude." I glanced at Marcus, who was trying to look magnanimous. Peterson Financial Services was the small investment firm he'd started 2 years ago with family money. According to the research I'd done, they had exactly 12 clients and were struggling to maintain profitability in a competitive market. "Of course," Dad added, "this is contingent on you giving up this computer hobby and committing to a real career path. No more freelance work. No more staying up all night staring at screens. Time to grow up." The computer hobby. If only they knew that my hobby had started with $500 in Bitcoin when I was 19 and had grown into something that would shock them speechless. "We're not doing this to be cruel," Mom said, sitting down at the table. "We love you, Alexandra, but enabling your delusions isn't helping anyone." My delusions? That was rich coming from a family who thought Marcus's struggling firm and Jennifer's mid-level marketing position made them business experts. So Dad leaned back with the satisfied expression of someone delivering an ultimatum. "What's it going to be? Are you ready to join the real world, or do we need to let you sink or swim on your own?" I looked around the table at their expectant faces. Marcus checking his watch again, Jennifer examining her nails, Mom wringing her hands with fake concern, Dad wearing his best disappointed father expression. Before I answer, I said carefully, "Can I ask what brought this on? Why now?" Jennifer rolled her eyes. "Because we're tired of making excuses for you. Last week at the Johnsons' charity gala, everyone was talking about their children's careers. I had to pretend I didn't know what you do for work. And the Hendersons keep asking when you're going to settle down with a nice young man." Mom added, "How can you find a suitable husband when you don't even have a proper job?" Marcus leaned forward. "Look, Alex, I've been watching your bank account activity. Dad asked me to keep an eye on your finances, make sure you weren't getting into trouble. That was also interesting. The account they'd been monitoring contained exactly $1,247, mostly from the monthly deposits I'd been unaware of. My actual banking was handled through a complex network of business accounts, investment portfolios, and offshore holdings that Marcus couldn't access even if he knew they existed. Your spending patterns are concerning," he continued in his professional advisor voice. "Rent on that cheap apartment, grocery bills, utility payments. You're living paycheck to paycheck on Dad's allowance. It's unsustainable." I almost laughed. The cheap apartment was a penthouse I owned outright in a building I'd purchased 6 months ago. The utility payments included electricity for the cryptocurrency mining farm I'd built in the basement, and the grocery bills reflected my preference for cooking at home rather than eating out every night like my siblings. "We're just worried about you," Dad said with practiced sincerity. "You're 25 years old with no savings, no career prospects, no direction. We can't watch you waste your life anymore." "So, we're cutting you off," Mom repeated firmly. "No more enabling your delusions." I nodded slowly, pulling my phone from my pocket. "I understand your concerns." Right then, as if scripted by the universe itself, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID read, "Patricia Morrison, Morrison and Associates." Patricia was my accountant, one of the city's top financial professionals who specialized in high-net-worth clients. She handled the complex tax implications of my various investments and business ventures, and she always called with the quarterly portfolio updates on Saturday mornings. Perfect timing. "I'm sorry," I said politely, "but I need to take this call. It's about my taxes." Dad waved dismissively. "Make it quick. We're not finished here." I answered the phone and, after a moment's consideration, pressed the speaker button. "Good morning, Patricia." "Miss Peterson." Patricia's crisp, professional voice filled the kitchen. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I have your quarterly portfolio summary ready, and I wanted to discuss some tax optimization strategies before the deadline." My family exchanged glances. Jennifer rolled her eyes at what she assumed was some small freelance payment. "Of course," I said calmly. "What are the current numbers?" "Well," Patricia continued, "your cryptocurrency portfolio has performed exceptionally this quarter. With the recent surge in Bitcoin and the stellar performance of your alternative coin investments, your total crypto holdings have reached $4.2 billion. The kitchen went dead silent. Dad's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. Mom's hands froze on the dishcloth she'd been holding. Marcus stared at my phone like it had just announced the end of the world. Jennifer's mouth fell open. "Additionally," Patricia continued, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped, "your real estate portfolio is now valued at $1.8 billion, and your tech stock investments have reached $2.3 billion. Combined with your traditional investments and business holdings, your total net worth is now approximately $8.7 billion. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if everyone had stopped breathing. "Miss Peterson, are you there?" "Yes, Patricia." "I'm here, just reviewing the numbers with my family." "Ah, wonderful. I trust they're pleased with your investment performance. Few people your age have built such a diversified portfolio. Your early adoption of cryptocurrency combined with your strategic real estate acquisitions and technology investments has created remarkable wealth accumulation." Marcus made a choking sound. "Now," Patricia continued, "we do need to discuss some tax implications. With withholdings of this magnitude, we'll need to restructure several of your shell companies and consider some additional offshore vehicles. I've scheduled meetings with your lawyers for Monday. Will that work with your schedule?" "That should be fine," I managed, watching my family's faces cycle through disbelief, shock, and dawning recognition. "Excellent. Oh, and congratulations on the Johnson property acquisition. Owning the entire Riverside commercial complex at your age is quite impressive. Your mother and father must be very proud." Dad's face had gone pale. The Riverside Commercial Complex was the premium office building where Peterson Financial Services rented their small suite. Marcus had complained about the rent costs just last month. "Thank you, Patricia. We'll talk Monday. Have a wonderful weekend, Miss Peterson. Give my regards to your family." I ended the call and placed the phone carefully on the table. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, and what sounded like Marcus's world quietly crashing down around him. 8.7 billion, Mom whispered finally. "Dollars," I confirmed. Dad set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. "Alexandra, I don't understand." I looked around the table at their stunned faces. 3 years of condescension, pity, and disappointed lectures had led to this moment. 3 years of them assuming I was a failure while I built an empire they couldn't comprehend. "What don't you understand, Dad?" "The money." "Oh, you work on computers in your apartment." "I work on computers in my penthouse," I corrected gently. "The penthouse I own, in the building I bought using money I made from investments I started when I was 19. Jennifer found her voice. But you drive that old Honda." "I drive a 2019 Honda Civic because it's reliable and fuel efficient. I also own a Tesla Model S, a BMW i8, and a vintage Porsche 911, but I don't drive them often because I work from home most days." Marcus was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "The bank account. I've been monitoring your spending. You have $1,200. You've been monitoring one account that I forgot existed until today. An account I haven't used since college because I have approximately 37 other accounts across various institutions along with investment portfolios, business holdings, and cryptocurrency wallets that contain, well, you heard Patricia's numbers." I stood up and walked to the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of water. I needed a moment to process what was happening, and they needed time to absorb the reality of their situation. "But you live so simply," Mom said, her voice small and confused. "I live efficiently," I explained, returning to the table. "When you have enough money to buy anything you want, you realize that wanting less is more valuable than having more. I don't need to flash wealth to feel successful." Dad was shaking his head slowly. "The computer work, the freelance jobs. I do take freelance projects occasionally, but not for the money. I enjoy coding, and sometimes interesting problems come up that challenge me. Last month, I helped a startup optimize their database architecture. The month before that, I consulted on a blockchain implementation for a financial services company." "You're a consultant?" Jennifer asked weakly. "Among other things. I'm also an investor, a property owner, a cryptocurrency trader, and according to Forbes' preliminary research for their next young entrepreneurs list, I'm what they call a stealth billionaire." Marcus finally found his voice. "Forbes? They've been trying to interview me for 6 months. I've been declining because I prefer privacy, but after today, I shrugged. Maybe it's time to be more public about my success." I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through my contacts. "In fact, let me call them back." "No," Dad said quickly. "Wait, just wait." I paused, finger hovering over the contact for Sarah Kim, the Forbes reporter who'd been persistently seeking an interview. "Help me understand," Dad continued. "If you have this much money, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were struggling?" I set the phone down and looked at him carefully. "When did you last ask me about my work, Dad? Really ask, not just dismiss it as computer games?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "When did any of you show interest in what I was actually doing? You made assumptions about my life based on superficial observations, and when I tried to explain my work, you brushed it off as unrealistic dreaming." I turned to Marcus. "Remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago? I tried to tell you about cryptocurrency investments, and you laughed and said digital money was a scam for people too lazy to get real jobs." Marcus winced. "And Jennifer, at your birthday party last year, I mentioned I was considering buying commercial real estate. You patted my head like I was a child and told me to focus on finding a husband instead of worrying about business." Jennifer looked down at her hands. "So I stopped trying to share my success with people who were convinced I was failing. It was easier to let you think what you wanted to think while I focused on building something meaningful." Mom's eyes were filling with tears. "But we're your family. We love you." "I know you love me," I said softly. But you love the version of me you created in your minds, the struggling daughter who needs rescue, the family disappointment who requires tough love and intervention. You never tried to see the actual me. I opened my laptop, which had been sitting closed on the counter. Would you like to see what I actually do all day? Without waiting for an answer, I pulled up my dashboard, real-time cryptocurrency prices, property management reports, investment portfolio summaries, business analytics from my various companies. This is my morning routine, I explained, clicking through screens. Check the Asian markets, review overnight crypto movements, approve or decline investment opportunities, monitor my property's performance, and manage my various business interests. The numbers on the screen were staggering. Daily gains and losses that exceeded most people's annual salaries, property rental income that could fund small cities, investment returns that compounded by the hour. My computer hobby involves managing assets worth more than most Fortune 500 companies, I continued. My freelance work includes consulting for major corporations on technology strategy. My simple lifestyle is a conscious choice to focus on building wealth rather than displaying it. Dad leaned back in his chair, looking older than he had an hour ago. Alexandra, I don't know what to say. You could start with, I'm sorry, I suggested. Sorry for assuming the worst. Sorry for trying to control my life without understanding it. Sorry for planning an intervention about my failed life without bothering to learn what my life actually involves. The kitchen fell silent again. Outside, I could hear neighbors starting their weekend yard work. Normal families dealing with normal problems. Inside, the Peterson family was grappling with the realization that their foundational assumptions about success, money, and their youngest daughter were completely wrong. $8.7 billion, Marcus said finally, his voice hollow. Give or take a few $100 million depending on market fluctuations, I confirmed. And you own my building. I own your building. Yes, along with most of the commercial district. It's been a good investment. Jennifer looked up from her hands. Alex, we had no idea. I know, I said. That's exactly the problem. I closed my laptop and sat back down at the table. Now, about this intervention. You wanted to cut me off from my allowance and force me to work for Marcus. Is that still the plan? Dad shook his head slowly. I think we need to reconsider our approach. Actually, I said, I have a counter-proposal. Instead of me working for Marcus, how about Marcus comes to work for me? Marcus's head snapped up. What? Peterson Financial Services is struggling. 12 clients, declining revenue, increasing overhead. You're paying $8,000 a month rent for office space in my building to serve a client base that's not growing. I pulled out my phone and opened a file I'd prepared months ago. I've been watching your firm's performance through public records and market analysis. You're good at the relationship side of financial services, but you lack the technical expertise and capital backing to compete with larger firms. How do you know about our client base? Marcus asked weakly. Because I know everything about every business in my buildings. It's called due diligence. I make it my business to understand my tenants' financial stability. I turned the phone toward him, showing a detailed analysis of Peterson Financial Services. But you have potential, your client retention is excellent, and your ethical standards are solid. You just need better resources and a broader investment platform. What are you proposing? Partnership. I provide the capital backing, advanced technology platform, and access to institutional-grade investment opportunities. You provide the client relationships and advisory expertise. We rebrand as Peterson Morrison Financial with you as managing partner of the advisory division. Marcus stared at the proposal on my screen. You'd do that after everything we said today? Marcus, you're my brother. You made assumptions about my life, but you're not malicious. You're just limited by your own experience and perspective that can be fixed with better information and expanded opportunities. I turned to Jennifer. As for you, Belmont Industries is a good company, but they're not maximizing their digital marketing potential. I've been considering acquiring a stake in their business. How would you feel about leading their digital transformation initiative? Jennifer's eyes widened. You're talking about buying part of my company? I'm talking about investing in their growth while positioning you as the executive who modernizes their entire marketing approach. Better title, significant salary increase, equity stake in the improved company. Finally, I looked at my parents. Mom, Dad, I don't need your money or your approval anymore. I haven't needed either for years. But I do want your understanding and support. Not for the struggling daughter you thought I was, but for the successful businesswoman I actually am. Mom was crying openly now. Alexandra, we're so sorry. We had no idea. I know, I said gently. But now you do. The question is, what do we do with this new information? Dad cleared his throat. What do you need from us? Respect, I said simply. Acknowledgement that I know what I'm doing. Trust that my choices are informed and deliberate even when you don't understand them, and maybe, just maybe, some curiosity about what I'm actually building instead of assumptions about what I'm failing to achieve. Can you forgive us? Mom asked. I smiled the same quiet smile I'd inherited from her. Mom, there's nothing to forgive. You acted based on the information you had. Now you have better information. What matters is what you do next. Marcus looked up from the phone where he'd been reading my partnership proposal. Alex, this is incredibly generous. Why would you offer this after the way we've treated you? Because that's what family does, I said. Real family supports each other's success, even when that success comes in forms they didn't expect. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd grown up. Besides, building wealth is only meaningful if you can share it with people you care about. I've proven I can make money. Now I want to prove I can use it to create opportunities for others. Jennifer, join me at the window. I feel like we don't even know you. You know me, I said. You just didn't know what I was capable of. There's a difference. Will you teach us? She asked quietly. About investing, about business, about all of this? I turned to look at my family, gathered around the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals and countless conversations. The same table where they'd planned to stage an intervention about my failed life now held documents outlining billion-dollar opportunities. I'll teach you everything you want to learn, I said. But on one condition. Anything, Dad said quickly. No more assumptions. When you have questions about my life or my work, ask me directly. When you don't understand something I'm doing, say so instead of deciding it must be wrong. Deal, they said in unison. I returned to the table and reopened my laptop. Good. Then let's start with cryptocurrency 101, because if we're going to be business partners, you need to understand how I built this empire. For the next 3 hours, I walked my family through the fundamentals of digital currency, blockchain technology, strategic investment, and long-term wealth building. Marcus took detailed notes. Jennifer asked intelligent questions about market psychology. Mom and Dad listened with the focused attention they'd never given my work before. By afternoon, we'd outlined partnership agreements, investment strategies, and a family business structure that would leverage everyone's strengths while capitalizing on my resources and experience. One more thing, I said as we wrapped up. I'm going to accept that Forbes interview, and when they ask about my family, I'm going to tell them about how you supported my unconventional path, even when you didn't understand it. Marcus looked confused. But we didn't support you. We tried to shut you down. Today you tried to shut me down, I corrected. But tomorrow you're going to start supporting me. And by the time the article comes out, it'll be the truth. That evening, I sat in my actual apartment, the penthouse I'd bought 2 years ago, reviewing the day's events. My phone had been buzzing with messages all afternoon from Marcus, reviewed the partnership terms. This is incredible. When do we start? From Jennifer, spoke with my boss about the digital transformation project. He's very interested in meeting with you. From Mom, honey, we're so proud of you. We should have seen this sooner. From Dad, I've been reading about cryptocurrency for the past 3 hours. My head hurts, but I'm starting to understand. Thank you for being patient with us. I smiled, looking out at the city skyline. The lights of downtown twinkled below, many of them illuminating buildings I owned, businesses I'd invested in, properties I'd developed. The intervention they'd planned to save me from my failed life had instead revealed that their assumptions about failure and success needed serious revision. My phone rang. Sarah Kim from Forbes. Miss Peterson, she said when I answered. I heard through the financial community that you might be ready for that interview. Yes, I said, settling into my favorite chair with a view of the city. I think it's time to tell my story. Wonderful. Our readers are fascinated by young entrepreneurs who build wealth through non-traditional paths. What would you say is the most important lesson you've learned? I thought about the kitchen table conversation, about 3 years of family dinners where they'd pitied my choices while I quietly built an empire. Success isn't about meeting other people's expectations, I said finally. It's about exceeding your own. And sometimes the biggest risk isn't failing publicly, it's succeeding privately while everyone assumes you're failing. That's fascinating. Can you elaborate? I looked out at my city, thinking about the family who'd spent years trying to save me from a life I'd never actually been living. Sometimes, I said, the best revenge isn't proving people wrong, it's building something so extraordinary that being wrong becomes the least of their concerns. As I settled in for a long interview about cryptocurrency, strategic investment, and the future of digital wealth, I couldn't help but smile. The failed life they'd tried to save me from had never existed. But the successful life I'd built in secret, that was just getting started. 3 months later, the Forbes article hit newsstands with my photo on the cover and the headline, "The 25-year-old who built a $9 billion empire while her family planned an intervention." By then, Peterson Morrison Financial had doubled its client base. Jennifer was leading the most successful digital transformation in Belmont Industries' history, and my parents had become surprisingly savvy cryptocurrency investors. The kitchen table, where they'd tried to cut me off from my allowance, now hosted weekly family business meetings where we planned new ventures, reviewed investment opportunities, and celebrated each other's success. And every Saturday morning when Patricia called with the quarterly portfolio updates, I made sure to put her on speaker.